I never thought a cold Tuesday afternoon in Riverside Park would break me. But there I was, a grown man in a tailored charcoal coat, sitting on an iron bench while snow drifted down like the world was quietly accusing me of every mistake I'd ever made. My coffee had gone cold, my hands were shaking, and for the first time in 15 years I couldn't pretend I was fine. I'd built an empire. People feared me. People obeyed me. But none of that helped when life finally caught up. It's strange how silence hurts more than bullets. And in that moment, staring at the frozen lake, I felt like I was staring into a mirror, cold, empty, and cracked. I didn't cry easily. I trained myself not to. My father walked out when I was 7, and crying stopped feeling useful after that. The foster homes taught me the rest. Don't depend on anyone. Don't get attached. Don't show weakness. And especially, don't let anyone see you break. But that day, something inside me just collapsed. Maybe because I'd run out of excuses. Maybe because I was tired of pretending I didn't care. Or maybe because the loneliness had finally grown too heavy for even me to carry. My vision blurred. I blinked fast, but the tears still came. Hot, shameful, unexpected. That's when I heard it. Tiny footsteps crunching in the snow. Then a small voice that didn't belong in my world at all. "Don't cry, mister." I froze. I wiped at my face quickly, like I could erase the evidence, but it was too late. A boy stood in front of me, maybe 7 or 8 years old, bundled in a bright blue jacket with 2 little mittens dangling from strings. His beanie had cat ears. His cheeks were red from the cold, and his eyes were full of worry. Real worry, the kind no adult ever showed me. He stepped closer, completely unafraid of the dangerous man everyone else avoided. "You okay?" he asked softly. My throat tightened. I opened my mouth to tell him to go back to his mom, but no words came out. Just a rough breath that turned into cold mist in the air. The boy tilted his head like he was studying a puzzle. "It's okay," he said. And then, like it was the most normal thing in the world, he reached out and patted my knee with his small mitten hand. "My mom makes everything better. She gives the best hugs. And she has cookies." He brightened suddenly. "You can borrow her if you want." Borrow her. I almost laughed and cried at the same time. Nobody had ever offered me something so simple and so big. Before I could answer, the boy lifted his arm and pointed across the park at a woman near a hot chocolate stand. Cream-colored coat. Shopping bags on her arm. Blonde hair pulled back. Watching the world with the tired attentiveness only good mothers have. "That's her," he said proudly. "Her name is Deborah. She's the best mom in the whole world." I swallowed hard. My heartbeat stumbled because the woman had just noticed her son standing with a stranger. Me. She rushed toward us with worry flashing in her eyes. Not fear of me specifically. Just a mother protecting her child. "Luke!" she called, reaching us in moments. Her hand landed firmly on his shoulder as she looked me up and down, taking in my expensive coat, leather gloves, and apparently tear-stained face. "I'm so sorry," I said quickly, realizing how this looked. "Your son is very kind. I didn't mean to frighten you." Luke interrupted proudly. "Mom, he's sad. He needs cookies." Deborah's expression softened, but she was cautious. Anyone would be. She looked at her son, then at me again with a mixture of worry and understanding. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice gentle but careful. I had been asked that question 1,000 times in my life by employees, associates, and enemies. But never like that. Never like it actually mattered. "I don't know," I admitted. Luke tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, can we take him for cookies?" She hesitated. I didn't blame her. I was a stranger. A tall, expensive, tired-looking stranger on a park bench. But then she really looked at me. Not the clothes, not the posture, not the surface. She saw the man underneath. "We were just heading to the cafe across the street," she said slowly. "If you'd like to warm up, you're welcome to join us." I shouldn't have said yes. My world didn't mix with people like them. Ordinary, kind, safe. People who lived in the daylight and went home to warmth. But when she spoke, something inside me broke open. "I'd like that," I heard myself say. Luke beamed like he'd just solved the world's biggest problem. and the three of us walked toward the cafe, the dangerous man, the brave little boy, and the woman who didn't yet know she was about to change my life. As the door opened and the warm air hit my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Fragile, impossible, dangerous. But hope. And it all started with a little boy saying the words I didn't know I'd needed my whole life. "Don't cry, mister. You can borrow my mom." The moment we stepped inside the cafe, the warmth washed over me so fast my eyes stung again. Maybe it was the shift in temperature. Maybe it was the way the place smelled like cinnamon and cocoa. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking into a room alone. Luke ran ahead like he owned the place. Deborah followed more slowly, brushing snow from her coat. I kept a few steps back, unsure if I belonged here. Unsure if I belonged anywhere near them. But then Luke looked over his shoulder and waved me forward. "Come on, Mr. Sean, you sit with us." Mr. Sean. That was the moment I realized he had already decided I was part of something, even if I hadn't. We found a small corner table, still warm from the people who had just left. Deborah set her shopping bags down and unwound her scarf. When she looked at me across the table, it wasn't with fear or discomfort. It was with a kind of quiet curiosity that made my chest tighten. "What would you like to drink?" she asked. "I'll get it," I said quickly, reaching for my wallet. Paying was the one language I understood, the one thing I knew how to offer. She hesitated but nodded. "Hot chocolate for Luke, coffee for me." "Black, 1 sugar." "And cookies?" Luke called from his seat. "3, 1 for each of us, and maybe 1 extra in case someone else needs it." I almost smiled. 4 cookies. Got it. I walked to the counter, noticing how out of place I looked among families, students, and older couples reading newspapers. I was a shadow in a warm room, a problem in a place meant for peace. But the barista didn't seem to care. She took my order, and while I waited, I found myself watching Deborah and Luke. He was talking nonstop, hands moving as he described something from school. She listened with patience I didn't understand, nodding, smiling, asking questions. It struck me how gentle she was with him, how present. No one had ever been like that with me. When the tray was ready, I carried it back carefully. Luke's eyes lit up the second he saw the cookies. "You got 4!" he exclaimed. "I knew you were nice." I set everything down, and he wasted no time grabbing his hot chocolate. Deborah wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was soaking in the warmth. We sat there quietly for a moment, and I realized how unfamiliar peace felt. "So," Deborah said, meeting my eyes, "what brings you to the park on such a cold day?" Quote, Luke looked up at me, waiting for my answer, too. A lie would have been easy, but sitting in front of them, it felt wrong. "I was supposed to meet someone for business," I said. "They canceled. I stayed anyway." I didn't feel like going back. "Were you sad because of work?" Luke asked directly. Children never circle around the truth. They run straight through it. I swallowed. "Something like that." "It's okay," he said. "Mom gets sad too." "Everyone gets sad." Deborah shot him a look, the kind meant to protect adult secrets, but he just took a big bite of his cookie like nothing unusual had been said. "What do you do for work?" she asked next. "Consulting," I answered. The truthful version would have terrified her. "I run a firm." "It's complicated." "I bet," she said softly. Luke didn't care at all. He pointed at the 4th cookie. "Who's that one for?" I thought for a moment. "Maybe for someone else who needs it," I said. His face lit up like Christmas morning. "That's what I said. Sharing makes everything better." Quote. Deborah smiled at that, actually smiled, and something inside me shifted. I hadn't seen a smile like that directed at me in years. We talked for a long time, longer than I expected. Luke told me about school, about his rock collection, about how he wanted a real artist set for his birthday. Deborah told me she was a teacher, 2nd grade. That explained the patience. She asked about my family. I hesitated, but she didn't push when my answer came out thin and short. The more we talked, the more I felt something I didn't understand. Connected. Seen. Safe. After a while, Luke's energy started fading. His blinks got slower. His head kept drifting onto his mother's arm. "I think someone's about to fall asleep," Deborah murmured. Luke's eyes lifted to mine. "Mr. Sean," he said softly, "are you still sad?" The question hit hard. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. "No," I said, voice low. "Not right now." He smiled, satisfied. "See, Mom, cookies help." Deborah laughed quietly, brushing Luke's hair back. Then she looked at me again, but this time her expression held understanding. Not pity, something warmer. "Thank you," she said gently, "for staying." She didn't know what those words did to me. I had everything money could buy, but no one, not a single person, had genuinely thanked me for simply being there. When they started packing up, something inside me tightened with fear that this little moment, this little glimpse of a life I'd never had, was about to end. But as they stood, Deborah hesitated. "We come to the park often," she said softly, "if you ever want to join us again." I nodded before she even finished. Luke slipped his small hand into mine without hesitation. "Now you have friends," he said proudly, "so you don't have to cry anymore." Friends? The word hit deeper than anything else that day. I walked them to the door. Deborah gave a small wave. Luke gave a big one. When they left, the cafe felt colder, even with the heater humming. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to go back to my empty penthouse. I didn't want silence. I didn't want power. I wanted them, and I didn't know it yet. But this was the beginning of everything. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I walked into my penthouse, the one people whispered about, the one with the $1 million view, and all I felt was cold glass and empty space. Every light turned on automatically, like my home was trying to prove something, but I couldn't feel any of it. Not after sitting in a warm cafe with a little boy who offered me half his cookie. Not after seeing the way his mother looked at me like I wasn't some shadow passing through her world. I tried drowning myself in paperwork and strategy, in meetings I didn't care about. But my mind kept drifting back to Luke's small hand in mine, to Deborah's soft voice saying thank you, to that table where, for a moment, I felt like I belonged. And that terrified me more than any rival ever had. The next morning, before I could talk myself out of it, I found myself back at the park. Same bench, same lake, same cold wind. The only thing different was the hope in my chest I wasn't ready to admit to. I didn't think they'd come, but around 11 I heard running steps. Luke's voice cut through the quiet. "Mr. Sean!" He barreled toward me, smiling so big his beanie nearly fell off. Deborah followed behind with a thermos in her hands and that careful, warm expression that made something in my chest loosen. "You came back," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure I would," I admitted. "Why not?" Luke asked, sitting beside me like he'd been doing it all his life. I looked at him, then at Deborah. "Because sometimes grown-ups think they shouldn't want things they can't have." Luke frowned. "That's silly. If something makes you happy, you should want it." Deborah laughed under her breath. "He gets that from me." She handed me a cup of hot chocolate from the thermos, our fingers brushing. A tiny touch, a tiny spark. Bigger impact than either of us expected. "So," she said, settling beside Luke, "are you okay today?" I didn't lie. "I'm better than I've been in a long time." The three of us sat there watching the lake, and for a moment I let myself imagine a life where this was normal. Warm drinks, small talk. A kid leaning against my arm, trusting me without knowing the weight of the world I carried behind my name. But everything fragile eventually cracks. "Mom," Luke said suddenly, "can Mr. Sean come to my birthday? It's next month." Deborah stiffened slightly. Just a second. So small anyone else would have missed it. But I saw. Her guard wasn't down. Not fully. And she had every right to be careful. "I don't want to impose," I said quickly. Luke looked horrified. "You're not imposing. You're my friend." Deborah sighed, then smiled gently. "If you'd like to come, Sean, you're welcome." I nodded, surprised by how much the invitation meant. But before I could thank her, a question slipped out, one I didn't mean to ask. "What about his father?" Deborah froze. Luke didn't. "He left," he said simply, "before I was born." Deborah's eyes dropped to her hands. Shame? No pain she'd carried alone for years. "I'm sorry," I said softly. She looked up. "It is what it is." I've raised him on my own. It's not always easy, but it's worth everything." Quote. I didn't know what to say to that. I'd never had a family. I'd never been anyone's priority. Maybe that's why I couldn't stop staring at the way she tucked Luke's hat down over his ears. The way she made sure he was warm before she cared about herself. That kind of love didn't exist in my world, and suddenly I wanted to protect it. Protect them. Even from myself. A week later, I found myself at Deborah's small apartment for Luke's 8th birthday. I stood outside the building holding a gift I'd spent hours choosing. A professional art set he'd wanted for months. Something real. Something meaningful. When Deborah opened the door, the smell of cake, frosting, and childhood hit me so hard my throat tightened. "You came," she said softly. I stepped inside. The apartment was small but filled with warmth. Drawings on the walls, books stacked everywhere, a couch with a faded blanket. It felt like a home, something money couldn't buy. Luke spotted me and ran across the room. "Mr. Sean, you made it! Come see my rocks!" Quote. The other kids stared at me like I was a giant intruding on their universe, but they didn't care after Luke proudly announced, "This is my friend." And for hours, I let myself be part of their world, playing games, building block towers, eating cake on plastic plates. My suit jacket came off, my sleeves rolled up, and I laughed more in one afternoon than I had in years. But the world always finds its way back in. My phone buzzed. A crisis. A shipment. A risk. A problem with my empire. I stepped into the hallway to answer. Marco's voice was low, urgent. "Boss, we've got a situation. You need to make a call." I looked back toward the living room where Luke was laughing. Deborah was handing out cake. It was the kind of moment people take for granted, but I never had. "I can't leave," I said quietly. "Handle it." "Boss, this is big." "So is this." I hung up. For once, my empire could wait. When the party ended and the kids left, Deborah and I stayed behind to clean. Luke had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching his new art supplies. "Thank you for today," she said softly, stacking plates. "He'll remember this for a long time." "I will too," I admitted. Then she turned to me, her expression shifting, serious, searching. "Sean, who are you really?" The question froze my breath. "I know you're not just a consultant," she continued. "The car, the way you talk, the way you handled that phone call. There's more to your life than you're telling me." She deserved the truth, or at least part of it. "I work in unconventional finance," I said slowly. "It's complicated, not always clean." Her face fell, not in judgment, but in fear. "For Luke," she whispered, "I can't let anything dangerous near him." "I would never hurt you," I said quickly. "Or him, ever." She held up a hand. "I need time. I need to think. I need to understand what being part of your life really means." Time. Something I'd never had patience for, but for her, I nodded. "Take whatever time you need." Her voice broke as she whispered, "A week." A week without them felt like punishment, but I accepted it. I walked out of that apartment feeling the weight of two worlds pulling me apart. The boy who asked me not to cry, and the life that made me learn how. That week felt longer than any prison sentence I could have imagined. Every night I sat in my penthouse, surrounded by glass and silence, trying not to check my phone every 5 minutes. I worked harder than ever. Meetings, operations, decisions, but none of it mattered. Not really. Not when I didn't know if Deborah would call. Not when I didn't know if Luke still asked about me. Not when the only place I wanted to be was a tiny apartment that smelled like crayons and vanilla cake. On the 7th night, just when I'd convinced myself she wasn't going to reach out, my phone lit up with her name. My pulse jumped so hard it hurt. "Hi," she said quietly. "We need to talk." I drove to her apartment like a man chasing oxygen. When she opened the door, she looked nervous, tired, but not closed off. Luke peeked around her legs, eyes huge. "You were gone forever," he said, running straight into me. "Mom said adults need time, but I thought maybe you stopped being our friend." I swallowed hard and knelt down so we were eye level. "I will always be your friend, kid," I said softly. "Adults mess things up sometimes. But I'm here, and I'm not leaving unless you tell me to." He nodded seriously, accepting the promise as simple truth. Then Deborah led me to the kitchen table. We sat facing each other while Luke drew in the living room. "I thought a lot," she said. "I talked to people. I read things. I tried to understand what your world actually is." My chest tightened. "And?" I asked. "You're not safe," she said honestly. "Your world isn't safe. And I have to think about Luke first." I looked down, bracing myself for the goodbye I wasn't ready to hear. "But," she continued softly, "I also asked myself what kind of life I want. What kind of life I want for Luke. And the truth is, these past weeks, he has been happier than ever. And I have too." I looked up slowly. She took a shaky breath. "I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." The air left my lungs in a rush. "But I need to understand," she added gently. "I need to see what your world looks like. The parts that aren't dangerous, the people in it." "I can do that," I said immediately. "I'll show you anything you want." And I meant it. For the first time in my life, I wanted someone to see me. Not the boss, not the empire, not the title. Me. That Friday, I took her to meet Marco, my right hand, my closest friend, the kind of man who could break bones or bake cupcakes, depending on who asked. We met at a family restaurant. Marco arrived on time, shook Deborah's hand politely, and talked about his kids the way other men talked about sports teams. Watching him talk about homework battles and school plays, Deborah finally understood what I'd been trying to tell her. My world wasn't all guns and shadows. It was people, families, loyalty, humans trying to survive in the spaces life didn't make easy. When we left the restaurant, Deborah exhaled for the first time in weeks. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For trying, for letting me see you." She lifted her hand to my cheek, a soft touch, a gentle promise. Then she kissed me, not rushed, not unsure, certain, like she'd already decided the answer. After that, everything changed slowly and all at once. I met them at the park twice a week, sometimes more. We went to the library together. I helped Luke draw landscapes and superheroes. Deborah taught me the comfort of small routines, grocery lists, bedtime stories, movie nights. My business shifted too. I handed more responsibilities to Marco, stepped away from the risky parts, invested in legitimate pathways, cut ties where needed. It wasn't simple, it wasn't clean, but it was happening. I wasn't doing it for appearance, I was doing it for a future I finally wanted. A future with them. Months passed, summer arrived, parks turned green. Kids filled the playgrounds. And one warm Wednesday afternoon I arrived to find Luke standing in front of the bench with a strange seriousness. "Mr. Sean," he began, clutching something behind his back, "I have a really big question." Deborah stood beside him, eyes shining. My heart jumped. Luke took a breath. "You make Mom happy," he said carefully, "and you make me happy, and you're here every week, and you listen and help me draw and come to my games." He stepped closer and pulled out a small drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. Me, Deborah, Luke. "Mom says families can look different," he continued, "so I want to ask if you'll be my dad, not like the papers yet, but like real. In here." He tapped his chest. "If it's okay." I felt something break inside me in the best possible way. I dropped to my knees and pulled him into my arms. "Yes," I said, voice shaking. "Yes, Luke. I would be honored. I love you, both of you." Deborah joined the hug, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. For the first time, I understood what home felt like. As the sun set behind Riverside Park, the same place I once cried alone, Luke squeezed my hand and said the words that had started everything. "Don't cry, Dad. These are happy days now." And he was right. They were. The life I'd built in shadows couldn't compare to this simple moment. The 3 of us walking toward Deborah's old car, Luke swinging our hands between us, Deborah leaning into me, and the world feeling warm for the first time. My empire could wait. This was my real life, my real family, my second chance. And I wasn't letting it go.